I look like a fucking troglodyte. Hello, my name's Harrison Turner. You might know me from certain projects such as System of a Down, Worst to Best, Harry's Top 10 Beach House Songs, Outcast, Why Are They Important, and a handful of other projects, specifically 2 other projects. And today, I'm going to be talking about horror in music. Now, you might be asking, why am I talking about a horror-related piece of media in June? And that's a very good question. Anyway. So recently I've been watching a lot of those horror parody animation things for guys like Meat Canyon and Ethereal Snake, and it got me in a little bit of a spooky mood, so we're just gonna roll with it.
I just don't know why you didn't try the Big Mac. Was it me? Don't you want to know how succulent it can taste?
Horror-based media is a very successful genre of art, especially in the film industry and the literature industry. However, horror can exist in many other facets of art, such as physical art, video games, and yes, even music. And since this is a music channel, as much as I would love to analyze PT, the title dictates that this is going to be about music, and also Nakey Jakey already did a video talking about PT a lot. Alright, to kick this off, let's do an experiment. So let's say some stranger on the street, probably me, I don't know who else will be doing this, so let's say I walk up to you on the street and say, hey you, yeah, you with the cute face. Off the top of your head, what's a scary song? I'm sure most of you would pick a song within 2 categories, let's call them. On one side, you might think of something from a scary game or a movie or something like this Halloween theme, the Psycho theme, the fucking Lavender Town theme, I don't know. These super iconic scores have stood the test of time, and rightfully so. They are very creepy and very effective. The other side of the coin features a lot of spooky lyrical content-based songs. It could be songs that more or less are written for a younger demographic, like Spooky Scary Skeletons, or Monster Mash, or This Is Halloween. Or if you're more into adult graphic content, you might cite any number of Misfits songs. You might cite Alice Cooper's Feed My Frankenstein. You might cite Thriller by Michael Jackson. There's a lot of songs that can fit in this category. What about Superstition by Stevie Wonder? I don't know why that was a search result. I mean, I guess it's about being superstitious, which is linked to being spooky in a very loose way. Not a very strong connection, and I just found it really funny. That's not even mentioning the other songs on here, like the classic Halloween song Hamburger Lady by Throbbing Gristle. You wish you had talent like these guys. I'm getting off topic. But would it really be one of my videos if I didn't get off topic? Let's keep going. Now, these are all valid answers, don't get me wrong. However, I don't think they completely encapsulate horror on its own. In regards to the songs written for movies, a big reason these are so effective is the context of the movie that they were written for. If you played the Psycho theme for someone and they've never heard of the movie, they'd probably think it's a bunch of out-of-tune grade school violinists fucking around before rehearsal. And as amazing as the soundtrack to the Lighthouse is, I'd describe it as more ominous than outright scary. In reference to the other category of horror-esque lyrics, while Frankenstein and Skeletons and fucking Stevie Wonder are all pretty spooky, I don't think any of those songs are actually very scary. As a matter of fact, it's probably not even the goal of those songs to scare you. And that doesn't mean they're bad songs by any stretch of the imagination. Spooky Scary Skeletons is an absolute slapper, and you're wrong if you disagree. It's just not very scary.
Spooky scary skeletons speak with such a screech.
So this little research I just presented to you taught me 2 things about horror music, as it were. First thing is that horror-based lyrics, while still a relatively important element, aren't the only factor in making a song scary. And the second thing I realized is that it's pretty much impossible to make a song scary, at least in the traditional sense. When watching a scary movie, let's use It Follows as an example, when you see something that scares you, like that fucking little boy with no eyes crawling through the hole in the door at the beach house, your adrenaline starts pumping, your fight or flight response kicks in. For a brief moment, your body is ready to react to danger. The thing about that is, though, that while the audio is an essential factor in making that effective, it's a combination of the visual and audio in that scenario that makes it scary. Music just doesn't really have that capability on its own without the visual aspect. I mean, sure, a sudden jarring effect in a song might make you flinch or even, jump a little, but I haven't heard a song really do that, and it's probably ruins the song, for being honest. It would probably suck. So if horror music isn't scary, how can music have horror in it, you ask? As an example, let's go back to the Halloween theme. While certain horror movie soundtracks don't feel like a horror song outside the context of the movie, John Carpenter's score is different. The tunes written for this movie are some of the most celebrated and well-respected pieces of horror music out there, but not exclusively because of the scene that it was paired along with. I don't remember Sleepy Hollow because I liked the soundtrack so much. I remember it because I was 7 when I watched a child get murdered and I pissed myself, you fucking piece of shit! The reason it's regarded as a scary piece of music is because the sound itself is chilling, it's unsettling. It makes you feel uncomfortable. It makes you anxious. It has tension. Instead of activating an instinctual life or death response, it gives you, goosebumps. Makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. And this sensation can be achieved through multiple different tones of songwriting. John Carpenter achieved this effect through the eeriness and dissonance of his simple piano score, whereas something like Goblin's prog rock track on Suspiria achieved this through these warping, futuristic synths. The soundtrack has an overall sense of urgency rather than pure creepiness, and then the vocalist comes in, and it's kind of funny, honestly, but whatever. But to whatever capacity something fits in between, along, or outside these boundaries, that's what horror music is. It's not about whether or not the lyrics are spooky. It's about unnerving suspense that is created through the music and the execution of the music. One of the reasons I chose to use It Follows as an example is because the movie itself really isn't all that groundbreaking. Not to be said the exact idea's been done before, but it's certainly not reinventing the wheel or Citizen Kane or some shit. However, the way the movie is directed, the cinematography, the acting, the score, and all these other elements, the way they all come together is what makes the movie so scary. The content isn't that important. Just because a movie has a serial killer in it doesn't make it scary. I mean, for fuck's sake, you can make a comedy out of that. Actually, they've already made a comedy out of that. And just as the songs, like whatever ones I talked about at the beginning of the video show, it's the same way with music. To further delve into this world, I want to talk about a song that came out last year called Do You Doubt Me Traitor by Lingua Ignota. Now, the song isn't perfect by any means. I don't even like the album that much, if I'm being totally honest. But this song perfectly exemplifies what I'm talking about. The song opens up with this very slow, dramatic, bass-heavy piano part with this occasional rattling sound. The vocals come in, and while they're at first very reserved, they're still very close and claustrophobic feeling, which is fitting because Kristen recorded this on the floor of her closet and when she sent it to her producer. This goes on for a couple minutes until she gets this Satan fortify me shit, and this orchestral part fades in and she just starts fucking screaming. It's this deeply, emotionally scarred scream. After another minute or so, the whole "how can I break you before you break me" starts rolling in, and the wailing shrieks just sounds so painful and agonizing. It makes you want to curl up in a ball and wish you were never born. But that's not even the worst fucking part. After about halfway through this breaking segment, the orchestral part starts to fade away and the instrumental drastically changes. These super eerie, creaky sound effects come in. The piano takes center stage again, but this time it's demonically sinister. The icing on this unholy cake is her vocals. They're just as pain-filled as before, but this time there's this super muddy and crinkly effect added to them and a lot of white noise to overly compress it. It's fucking terrifying. I feel so anxious that I can barely move when I hear that. It's that disconcerting. The rest of the song is irrelevant to me at that point. That is the ultimate moment. That encapsulates what I'm trying to say here so beautifully. And if you don't believe me, by all means, give this song a shot after you watch this video, of course. Please finish the video, but give the song a shot. Now, for as powerful of an example as Do You Doubt Me Traitor is to my thesis here, not all horror music is as panic attack inducing as this track is. If we look back at my film comparison, not all movies lumped into the horror genre are meant to outright scare you. A lot of these movies are meant to stay with you psychologically. A lot of these movies are more classified better as thrillers. And I find that a lot of horror songs achieve a lot of the same goals as thrillers as opposed to horror movies. Yeah, movies. That's the word I'm looking for. This helps us open up the definition of a horror song to include a much wider variety. And I don't think anything perfectly represents this idea like a track by one of my favorite bands, Shoo Shoo. Their track, Wigmaster. The song doesn't elicit the same, visceral experience that Do Doubt Me Traitor does, but it's still a wildly uncomfortable experience. And that's not from a lack of understanding on what to do on Shoo Shoo's end. They have plenty of songs that fit this bill. It Comes Out As a Joke is a great example of that. Wigmaster's differing tone is very intentional. Specifically to note, the performance of this song is what drives it to Mom Come Pick Me Up I'm Scared level. The instrumentation of this song is a couple overlapping cello and double bass parts, but rather than this heavenly enchanting sound that these instruments usually produce, it's very airy and hollow and unstable feeling. I don't really know how to describe it really. It's like looking at a gorgeous painting of a war-torn battlefield with bodies strung across the sunset. Despite how terrible the events happening are, there's a strange sense of tranquility to it. On top of this, there's points in the song where the cellist purposely fucks up that adds this really unnerving sensation to it. To add even more to that, we have the vocals, which in typical Shoo Shoo fashion are very close up. You can hear like the sounds of their fucking saliva moving around in their mouth. I know I said lyrics aren't the only factor, but they are still very important, and the very explicitly sexual content of this song is actually quite disturbing. It's very blunt, it's very upfront. They even reference pedophilia in a certain line. However, despite that, it's not like a horny song. It's very apathetic feeling. The inflections are almost like totally disinterested in the subject at hand. For me at least, this song coaxes out a very strange, almost numb feeling that a movie like Midsommar would. And it's actually kind of the reason I wanted to make this video. I really just like this song and I wanted to talk about it. Horror in music as opposed to horror music implies that songs don't necessarily need to be horror songs to use those elements effectively. A lot of songs use elements of horror to effectively convey their point even though it's not related to fear in any way. A lot of noise music does this, I think, but I'm not going to pretend I know anything about that shit, so let's just use some other examples. While the instrumental itself to Gojira's 1990 Quadrillion de Tonnes is a very slow, muddy riff, it features all these wailing shrieks and cries throughout the track. Despite fitting more into the groups like Feed My Frankenstein type songs, a lot of clipping songs, let's use All Black as an example, have a lot of super eerie wind and white noise effects over these very simple, minimalistic, glitchy synth and hi-hat beats. Speaking of those songs I mentioned earlier, a lot of them do incorporate these elements like the intro to Thriller by Michael Jackson or the atonal bass intro at the beginning of Halloween by the Misfits. I think Welcome to the Machine by Pink Floyd is a perfect example of this. This song is not a horror song by any means at all. However, it uses a lot of elements that Suspiria actually used. The most consistent elements that sustain throughout the duration of the song are these warbly singular notes and these really high off-putting synth chords. If you can't tell, I think synths are really good at this. Instead of making the song creepier though, it helps to reinforce the themes of conformity and the disillusionment of a dream that the song's trying to convey. When considering the music video as well, it's no doubt to see how these elements have made this song as classic as it's become. Speaking of the music video. Why are you texting me right now, Oliver? Musicians can incorporate the visual elements of horror to a certain degree. Sometimes that does come in the form of music videos. If you look at any Behemoth music video, you will know what I'm talking about. However, I find the most interesting visual aspects come from clips of live shows and concerts. For those of you that remember a pre-pandemic time, concerts were things you could go to watch your favorite musicians play their music live in front of your face. The first artist to really embrace this in the live setting was probably in the 70s with Alice Cooper. I remember my dad telling me once that Alice Cooper murdered his whole family and ate their hearts. I don't know why he told me that. And then he asked me if I wanted to go to one of his concerts on Halloween and meet him after for like a signing. And in retrospect, I really wish I'd gone. But I wasn't as much of a fucking freak when I was 7, and he scared the shit out of me, so I didn't want to go. Sometimes horror will come out in the theatricality and the light show and the stage props, which I'll talk about in a minute. I want to talk about the other things first, though. A lot of times this comes through the sheer intensity of the performance itself. A lot of good examples of this are bands like Swans, or Black Flag, or Dillinger Escape Plan, but that's more intimidating than scary, I think. Sometimes in the case of an artist like The Shining, having the singer fucking cut himself on stage, it's less intimidating than it is stupid. Whatever. Tying this into the next part, though, a lot of artists will use their bodies and physical appearance to create this effect. Till Lindemann of Rammstein will sometimes dress as a butcher with like a knife and a fucking flamethrower for their song Mein Teil, which is about a cannibal. Motionless in White like to paint themselves and have this really edgy, black, tattered clothing and overall just look really goth. The Misfits are just the Misfits. Gwar is just fucking weird. Slipknot, of course, has their famous masks, especially masks like Sean Cron and Craig Jones, which are very effective at being freaky. My favorites is Mick Thompson, but we're just gonna leave that between us. That's all fine and dandy, but the more exposed you are to these artists, the much less effective these become. They become less shocking and more just elements of their stage show that you've come to accept. Best live shows that utilize horror incorporate all of these theatrical elements that I talked about. And while I'm not a huge fan of the music, I've expressed this before, I think black metal actually does the best job at this. Black metal is of course famous for its use of corpse paint. If you don't know what that is, here's a picture of Eric Danielson from Watain. It's basically that. Originally derived from Kiss's makeup, corpse paint, as the name implies, is just trying to make you look like a sacrificed dead person. When done well, corpse paint does do a very good job at adding a sense of immersion to the live shows, but it's the performances where this is really enhanced. Shit's fucking insane, and that bald guy's face really fucking freaks me out. They don't pull any punches, it's all out aggression. I don't think I really need to say anything else in regards to that. Where it starts to get dicey for me is the use of stage props. Now, a lot of bands employ really cool stage props in their shows, be it a projector or Alice Cooper using a guillotine, or in Iron Maiden's case, they have Eddie the Head back there. It's the sign on the tank. I think that's also him. It is, but you can't really tell. Those are awesome. However, let's go a little bit further into that video of Gorgoroth. If you'll look to your left, my right, if you're an observant viewer, you might notice that's a fucking sheep's head on a pike. Now, I'm all about doing whatever you want as long as you're not hurting someone, and I'm well aware that the animal was probably dead before that. Despite that, though, what the fuck? Moving past that as quickly as possible, the difference between a horror-esque live show and a horror song is actually quite a drastic difference. Live shows do tend to rely a little bit more on the traditional scare than the dramatic sensation that horror music tends to implore. Every once in a while, an artist will try to intermingle these realities. I think a good example of that is A Little Piece of Heaven by Avenged Sevenfold. It's not exactly a scary song, but the subject material is very disturbing, and it's a very, very theatrical setup, and I will give it a pass for that. It's still a little cartoonish and goofy, but if you look at the music video, you'll know why I would say it there. Most examples of this suck dick, though. This leads me to my final point about horror music that I need to clarify. Gore and graphical content and intensity does not make a song scary. It just makes a gross song. Going back to my recurring theme of comparing movies and music, if we look at a lot of 80s slasher films, like Friday the 13th is a good example. It's a good movie. It's just kind of a murder fest. Now let's take a look at fucking Cannibal Holocaust. That's also a murder fest. And a terrible movie. Just because people are dying does not by default make a movie scary. However, making this mistake does not default make the movie bad either. Again, music is the same way. Hammer Smashed Face is kind of gross, but it's also one of the most well-respected death metal tracks of the 90s. But on the other hand, you have Cradle of Filth's Lord Abortion, which is a bad song. I know this is definitely off topic, but it's a misconception I need to bring up because a lot of people seem to fall into it. And they just start thinking shit like, hey, that song's scary because they talk about fucking mutilating a young woman. Because, well, yes, that's very uncomfortable. It's not uncomfortable for an enjoyable reason. On top of all these other elements, horror music, like any other form of entertainment media ever, is supposed to be likable. It's supposed to be amusing. By doing shit like that, you're just 100% missing the point of horror and boiling down the style of writing to just meaningless shock value rather than anything of interesting, complex substance. And not gonna lie, that peeves me a little. Because as the simply infectious melodies of John Carpenter and Shushu have shown, horror music just has much more to offer. Now that I think about it, songs like that are probably a little more in line with shitty jump scare horror movies like Annabelle, because tons and tons of creators just keep making them thinking that's what people want, because they do for some reason. The main difference is people realize gore grind sucks cock. As the fact that we're in the concluding paragraph of a school essay, what have we learned today? Well, I think we can all agree that horror in music is weird. It's weird to define, it's a weird balancing act to find without going overboard. It's weird how tangibly related it is to other forms of media, specifically movies. But overall though, I find horror music to be an incredibly interesting topic. I'm always looking for songs that give me that sense of anxiety because it's a feeling that I can't get enough of in movies or song. And I would definitely recommend giving some of these songs I mentioned a shot if you haven't heard anything like that and you would like to try it out, or if you're a fan of it in the first place. Even if you don't like horror movies, it's a very different form of entertainment. You might find yourself enjoying something that you didn't expect to like. And isn't that what life's all about, really? That's going to be the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. I had a load of fun doing research on this. I didn't really see any examples of people delving into this topic beyond like the technical levels, so I was really happy to do this. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content on the way. Let me know what you guys think about horror music. Agree, disagree, call me a dipshit, whatever you want. I'm always happy to discuss my content with you guys. In the description, you will find a link to my Twitter as well as a link to Oliver's Twitter and Instagram. Thanks again for editing these videos. And that's about it. I hope you have a fantastic fucking day. You deserve it.